The morning sun barely touched the windows of Kensington Palace when Catherine, the Princess of Wales, received the phone call that would change everything. Her hands trembled as she listened to the doctor's voice on the other end of the line. The words seemed to echo in the silence of their private quarters, each syllable carrying weight that pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. William was in his study, reviewing documents for his upcoming environmental summit, when he heard Catherine's sharp intake of breath from the adjacent room. The sound was unlike anything he had heard from her before, raw, vulnerable, and filled with a pain that seemed to cut through the very walls between them. He dropped his papers immediately and rushed to find her standing by the window, the phone still clutched in her hand, her face pale as winter frost. "Catherine?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but she turned to him with eyes that glistened with unshed tears. The strong woman who had stood beside him through countless public appearances, who had smiled through criticism and celebrated their triumphs with grace, now looked fragile in a way that made his heart clench with fear. She couldn't speak at first. The words seemed trapped somewhere between her heart and her throat, too painful to release into the world. William crossed the room in 3 quick steps and gently took the phone from her hands, setting it aside before pulling her into his arms. She felt smaller somehow, as if the news had physically diminished her strength. "The children," she finally managed to whisper against his chest. "How do we tell the children?" Her voice broke on the last word, and William felt his own composure begin to crack. Throughout their years together, through every challenge they had faced as a couple and as members of the royal family, they had always found strength in each other. But this was different. This was something that threatened to shake the very foundation of everything they held dear. The palace around them continued its daily rhythm. Staff members moved quietly through the corridors, preparing for another day of royal duties and obligations. But inside their private world, time seemed suspended. William held Catherine closer, feeling the weight of responsibility that came not just from their public roles, but from being parents, partners, and protectors of their families' happiness. Outside their window, London was waking up to another ordinary Tuesday. People were heading to work. Children were walking to school. Life was continuing in its predictable pattern. Yet inside the palace walls, the future suddenly felt uncertain. Catherine pulled back slightly to look at William's face, searching for the strength she knew she would find there, the same strength that had carried them through their courtship, their wedding, and the early years of their marriage. "We'll face this together," William said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing in his chest. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it as we always have. Together." He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the gentle gesture speaking volumes about the depth of their connection. Catherine nodded slowly, drawing comfort from his unwavering presence. She had always known that marrying William meant stepping into a life of public scrutiny and royal duty, but she had also gained a partner whose loyalty and love had never wavered. Even now, in this moment of crisis, she could see the determination in his eyes, the same look he wore when facing difficult decisions about his charitable work or challenging public appearances. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times, reminding them that the world beyond their private sanctuary would soon require their attention. There would be meetings to attend, appearances to make, and responsibilities to fulfill. But first, they needed to find a way to process this news themselves, to understand what it meant for their family and their future. Catherine took a deep breath, feeling some of her natural strength beginning to return. She had faced challenges before, the intense media scrutiny during their engagement, the pressure of royal protocols, the delicate balance of raising children in the public eye. This would be perhaps the greatest test yet, but she was not alone. She had William, she had their children, and she had the support of a nation that had watched their love story unfold over the years. "The appointment is tomorrow," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We'll know more then." William nodded, understanding that the next 24 hours would be filled with uncertainty and worry, but also knowing that they would navigate this challenge the same way they had navigated every other obstacle in their path, with dignity, courage, and an unshakable bond that had only grown stronger over the years. The hospital corridors seemed endless as William and Catherine walked side by side, their footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. They had chosen to use a private entrance, away from the prying eyes of photographers who seemed to lurk around every corner of their public lives. Today was not about royal duties or public appearances. Today was about facing the unknown together as husband and wife, as parents who needed answers. Catherine's hand found William's as they approached the consultation room, their fingers intertwining, naturally. The simple gold band on her finger caught the fluorescent lighting, reminding her of their wedding day when everything had seemed so perfect, so full of promise. She remembered walking down the aisle of Westminster Abbey, seeing William's face light up as she approached, feeling like nothing could ever harm their happiness. Dr. Harrison greeted them with a professional warmth that somehow managed to be both reassuring and concerning at the same time. His years of experience had taught him how to deliver difficult news with compassion, but William could see the gravity of the situation reflected in the doctor's careful manner. They took their seats in the comfortable chairs arranged around his desk, the afternoon sunlight filtering through the blinds and casting gentle patterns across the room. "I want to be completely honest with you both," Dr. Harrison began, his voice measured and calm. "The tests we ran yesterday have given us some concerning results that we need to discuss." Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat, but she forced herself to remain composed. Years of royal training had taught her to maintain her dignity, even in the most challenging circumstances. William's hand tightened around hers as the doctor continued to explain the medical details, using terms that seemed both clinical and terrifying at the same time. Catherine found herself focusing on small details, the way the light played across William's face, the sound of cars passing by on the street below, the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. These ordinary sounds seemed to anchor her to reality as the doctor's words threatened to pull her into a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. "What does this mean for our family?" William asked quietly, his voice betraying none of the turmoil Catherine knew was raging inside him. She had seen him in countless public situations, watched him handle difficult questions from reporters and navigate complex diplomatic conversations. But this was different. This was personal in a way that cut deeper than any public scrutiny ever could. Dr. Harrison leaned forward slightly, his expression softening with understanding. "It means we need to be very careful about the next few months. There will be treatments, regular checkups, and some difficult decisions ahead. But I want you to know that we have excellent protocols in place, and the prognosis, while serious, is not without hope." Catherine felt tears threatening to spill over, but she blinked them back determinedly. She thought about George, Charlotte, and Louis waiting at home, probably wondering why their parents had been so quiet at breakfast, why there had been hushed phone calls and serious conversations in the days leading up to this appointment. They deserved to have their mother strong and present, not consumed by fear and worry. "How do we tell the children?" she asked, voicing the question that had been haunting her since yesterday morning. "They're so young, and they don't understand why life sometimes brings challenges we can't control." Her voice wavered slightly on the last words, but she pressed on. "George is old enough to sense when something is wrong, but Charlotte and Louis—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. William shifted in his chair, moving closer to Catherine in that unconscious way couples do when they need to feel connected. "We'll find the right words," he said softly. "We'll explain it in a way that's appropriate for each of them, and we'll make sure they know that no matter what happens, they are loved and protected." The doctor nodded approvingly at their approach. "Children are often more resilient than we give them credit for. Honesty, delivered with love and age-appropriate language, usually serves families well in situations like this. They'll take their cues from both of you about how to process and cope with the information." As they left the hospital that afternoon, William and Catherine walked more slowly than they had arrived. The weight of knowledge seemed to make every step more deliberate, every breath more precious. The London streets bustled with typical afternoon activity, people hurrying home from work, students gathering in cafes, tourists snapping photos of historic buildings. But the royal couple moved through it all like they were walking underwater, processing their new reality one moment at a time. "We should call your parents first," Catherine said as they settled into the back of their car. "And then mine. They deserve to hear this from us directly, not from some tabloid speculation or palace statement." William nodded, already reaching for his phone. The thought of having those conversations filled him with dread, but he knew Catherine was right. Their families had been their anchor through every major milestone in their lives, and they would need that support more than ever in the coming weeks. The drive back to Kensington Palace gave them time to sit in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. Catherine watched the familiar landmarks pass by. The park where they sometimes took the children to play, the shops where she occasionally stopped for small purchases, the tree-lined streets that had become part of the backdrop of their London life. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, but somehow the world felt fundamentally different. The children's voices echoed through the palace corridors as William and Catherine approached the family sitting room. George's laughter mixed with Charlotte's excited chatter about her drawing lesson, while Louis's smaller voice piped up with questions about everything he saw. For a moment, Catherine paused in the doorway, watching her 3 children sprawled across the carpet with their toys and books, completely absorbed in their innocent world of imagination and play. "Mummy! Daddy!" Charlotte looked up first, her face lighting up with the pure joy that only children possess. She scrambled to her feet and rushed toward them, her pigtails bouncing with each step. Catherine caught her daughter in a warm embrace, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair and holding her just a moment longer than usual. George, now 9 and increasingly aware of the subtle changes in adult behavior, studied his parents' faces with curious eyes. "You were gone for a long time today," he observed, setting down his book about aircraft. "Was it important business?" His formal way of speaking sometimes reminded Catherine of William at that age, trying to understand the grown-up world that surrounded him. William settled into his favorite armchair, the one that had become worn and comfortable over years of family evenings. "Come here, all of you," he said gently, patting his lap for Louis while gesturing for the older children to come closer. "Mummy and I need to talk with you about something important." The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Children have an uncanny ability to sense when serious conversations are about to happen, and all 3 of them moved closer to their parents with suddenly quiet attention. Catherine took a deep breath, drawing on every ounce of strength she possessed to keep her voice steady and reassuring. Sometimes in life, families face challenges that test how strong they are together, she began, choosing her words carefully. "These challenges can be scary, but they also remind us how much we love each other and how we can help each other through difficult times." She looked at each of their faces in turn, seeing William's eyes in George, her own stubborn chin in Charlotte, and a mixture of both of them in little Louis. Charlotte, always the most emotionally perceptive of the 3, moved closer to her mother's chair. "Are you sick, Mummy?" she asked quietly, her small hand reaching out to touch Catherine's arm. The directness of the question caught Catherine off guard, and she felt tears threatening to surface despite her determination to remain composed. "The doctors are trying to help me get better," Catherine replied honestly. "But it might take some time, and there might be days when I don't feel very well. That's why we wanted to tell you together, so you would understand if I seem tired sometimes or if we need to change our plans occasionally." George, processing this information with his naturally serious demeanor, asked the question that Catherine had been dreading most. "Could you die?" His voice was small but brave, the way children sound when they're trying to be grown up about things that frighten them. William felt his heart constrict at his son's words, but he managed to keep his voice calm and reassuring. "The doctors are very smart, George, and they have lots of ways to help people get better. Mummy is strong and healthy in many ways, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure she stays with us for a very, very long time." Louis, not fully understanding the gravity of the conversation but sensing the emotional weight in the room, climbed onto Catherine's lap and wrapped his small arms around her neck. "I love you, Mummy," he whispered into her ear, his innocent declaration serving as a reminder of what truly mattered in their lives. "I love you too, sweetheart," Catherine whispered back, holding him close. "I love all of you more than all the stars in the sky." She looked over at William, who was watching their family with an expression of fierce protectiveness mixed with tender love. Charlotte, ever practical despite her young age, wanted to know about the details that mattered to her daily world. "Will, you still be able to read us stories at bedtime? And help with homework? And come to my school play next month?" Her questions tumbled out in a rush, each one representing a small piece of normalcy she was afraid of losing. "I will do my absolute best to be there for all of those things," Catherine promised, smoothing Charlotte's hair with gentle fingers. "And on the days when I can't, Daddy will be there, and we'll make sure you always have someone who loves you, taking care of you." She caught William's eye over Charlotte's head, and he nodded slightly, understanding the unspoken communication that had developed between them over years of parenting together. As the evening progressed, the children seemed to adjust to the news with the remarkable adaptability that youngsters possess. They asked practical questions about doctor visits and whether they could send drawings to help Mummy feel better. George wanted to know if he could research the medical condition to better understand what was happening, while Charlotte insisted on making a special get-well card immediately. Later that night, after the children had been tucked into bed with extra stories and longer goodnight hugs, William and Catherine sat together in their private sitting room, finally allowing themselves to feel the full weight of the day. Catherine curled up against William's side on their comfortable sofa, feeling grateful for the solid warmth of his presence. "They handled it better than I expected," she said quietly, her head resting on his shoulder. "Sometimes I forget how resilient children can be when they feel secure in their parents' love." William pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head, marveling once again at the strength and grace with which Catherine approached even the most challenging situations. "They're going to be okay," he assured her, though he knew the words were as much for his own comfort as for hers. "We're all going to be okay. We'll take this one day at a time and we'll face whatever comes next together as a family." The palace statement was scheduled to be released at noon, but word had already begun to spread through the tight network of royal correspondents and palace staff. William stood at the window of his private office, watching the growing crowd of photographers and journalists gathering beyond the palace gates. Their long telephoto lenses glinted in the morning sun like predatory eyes, ready to capture every moment of what would inevitably become a public spectacle. Catherine was in the adjoining room, working with their communications team to finalize the exact wording of the announcement. Every phrase had been carefully considered, every word weighed for its potential impact on public perception and media interpretation. She wanted the statement to be truthful without being overly detailed, honest without being alarmist, personal without being too intimate. "The Princess of Wales wishes to share that she has begun treatment for a medical condition that was recently diagnosed," she read aloud from the draft statement. "She is grateful for the excellent care she is receiving and looks forward to returning to her full schedule of royal duties when her health permits. The Prince and Princess ask for privacy during this time as they focus on family and recovery." Her voice caught slightly on the word recovery, and she had to pause for a moment to compose herself. The word implied hope and healing, but it also acknowledged that there was something from which she needed to recover. In her private moments, she tried not to dwell on the statistics and probabilities that Dr. Harrison had shared with them, but sometimes the clinical facts crept into her thoughts like unwelcome visitors. Maria Santos, their trusted communications director who had worked with the family for nearly 6 years, looked up from her laptop with sympathetic eyes. "We can adjust the language if this doesn't feel right to you, Your Royal Highness. This is your story, and it should be told in words that feel authentic to you." Catherine appreciated Maria's sensitivity, but she also knew that royal statements followed certain protocols and traditions. The balance between personal truth and public duty had always been delicate in their lives, but never more so than now. "I think it strikes the right tone," she decided. "It's honest without being dramatic, and it asks for what we need most right now, time and space to focus on healing." William joined them from his office, having finished a difficult phone call with his grandmother's former private secretary about protocol for handling royal health crises. The Queen had faced her own health challenges with characteristic dignity and discretion, and William wanted to honor that legacy while also acknowledging the different expectations of modern media coverage. "The children are at school," he reported, settling into the chair beside Catherine. "I spoke with their head teachers this morning to give them a heads up about potential media attention around the school. Security has been quietly increased, but we're trying to keep everything as normal as possible for them." His protective instincts as a father had gone into overdrive since receiving the diagnosis, and he found himself thinking constantly about shielding their family from unnecessary scrutiny. At exactly noon, the statement was released simultaneously to all major news outlets and posted on the official social media accounts of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Within minutes, Catherine's phone began buzzing with messages from friends and family members around the world. The speed at which news traveled in the digital age still amazed her sometimes, but today it felt overwhelming rather than impressive. The first messages came from those closest to them. Pippa sent a simple but heartfelt text saying, "Love you. Here for anything you need." William's father called within minutes of the statement's release, his voice thick with emotion as he offered his complete support and reminded them that the entire family stood behind them. Catherine's parents drove immediately to the palace, arriving with homemade soup and determined smiles that couldn't quite hide their worry. By mid-afternoon, the story had become the lead item on every news broadcast in the United Kingdom and many international outlets. Television reporters stood outside the palace gates speculating about treatment timelines and analyzing the wording of the statement for hidden meanings. Social media exploded with messages of support, mixed with invasive questions and uninformed theories about the nature of Catherine's condition. Catherine tried to avoid looking at the coverage, but occasionally caught glimpses of headlines on her staff's devices or overheard discussions about media strategy. The strangest part was seeing her own life discussed by people who had never met her, analyzed by medical experts who had never examined her, and debated by commentators who knew nothing about her actual daily experience with the diagnosis. "Look at this," William said, scrolling through his tablet as they sat together in their private sitting room that evening. Messages from heads of state, celebrities, and regular people from all over the world. The Prime Minister called personally, and apparently the President sent flowers that should arrive tomorrow. He looked up at Catherine with wonder in his voice. "I knew people cared about our family, but this response is extraordinary." Catherine felt touched by the outpouring of support, but also somewhat overwhelmed by the magnitude of public interest. She had always understood that being a member of the royal family meant living life in the public eye, but facing a health crisis while millions of strangers watched and speculated felt surreal and sometimes intrusive. "Mrs. Henderson from the village shop sent a card," Catherine said, holding up a simple get-well card decorated with pressed flowers. "And there's a stack of drawings from the local primary school wishing me a speedy recovery. Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most." She smiled genuinely for the first time that day, thinking about the children who had taken time to create colorful pictures for someone they had probably only seen in newspapers. As evening approached, William and Catherine established what would become their new routine, checking in with medical teams, coordinating with palace staff about adjusted schedules, and most importantly, making sure their own children felt secure and loved, despite the chaos swirling around their family. The children arrived home from school full of questions about why there were so many cameras outside and whether Mummy was famous because she was sick. "You were already famous, Mummy," Charlotte pointed out with 7-year-old logic. "But now you're famous for being brave too." Her innocent observation brought tears to Catherine's eyes, reminding her that even in the midst of medical uncertainty and media scrutiny, she was setting an example for her children about how to face life's challenges with dignity and grace. 6 weeks had passed since the public announcement, and Catherine was learning to navigate the strange new rhythm of life that included regular medical appointments, carefully managed energy levels, and the constant awareness that millions of people were following her journey. The treatment sessions left her tired in ways she had never experienced before, but she was determined to maintain as much normalcy as possible for her family. This particular morning held special significance. It was the day of Charlotte's school sports day, an event that Catherine had circled on her calendar months ago with eager anticipation. She had attended every major school event for each of her children, and despite her doctor's gentle suggestions that she might want to skip this outdoor gathering, Catherine was determined not to miss her daughter's big day. "Are you absolutely certain you feel up to this?" William asked for the third time as he helped her choose a comfortable outfit that would be appropriate for sitting on outdoor bleachers for several hours. His protective instincts had intensified over the past weeks, and he found himself constantly monitoring her energy levels and watching for signs of fatigue. Catherine smiled at his concern, touched by his attentiveness but also slightly amused by his hovering. "I've been looking forward to this for weeks," she assured him, pulling on a comfortable sweater in her favorite shade of blue. "Charlotte has been practicing her running form every evening in the garden. There's no way I'm missing the chance to cheer her on." The drive to the school felt different from their usual family outings. Security was more discreet but notably increased, and Catherine was aware that her attendance would likely attract media attention despite the school's strict policies about photography during student events. She had grown accustomed to living under scrutiny, but lately every public appearance felt weighted with additional meaning. When they arrived at the school grounds, Catherine was touched by the warm reception from other parents and teachers. People approached with genuine smiles and kind words, but she also noticed the careful way they watched her, as if looking for signs of illness or fatigue. She understood their concern came from a place of care, but it reminded her of how much her life had changed since the diagnosis. Charlotte spotted her parents immediately and came running across the field with a huge grin, her sports day number pinned proudly to her shirt. "Mummy, you came," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Catherine's waist. "I thought you might be too tired from your medicine days." Her innocent reference to treatment sessions made Catherine's heart swell with love for her perceptive daughter. "I wouldn't miss this for anything," Catherine assured her, kneeling down to Charlotte's level despite the twinge of exhaustion she felt from the simple movement. "I want to hear all about your events and see you run like the wind." Charlotte beamed and ran back to rejoin her classmates, her confidence visibly boosted by her mother's presence. As the day progressed, Catherine found herself deeply moved by the simple joy of watching her daughter participate in relay races and field events. Charlotte wasn't the fastest runner or the strongest competitor, but she participated with enthusiasm and good sportsmanship that made both parents proud. When Charlotte's team won the three-legged race, Catherine cheered so enthusiastically that she temporarily forgot about everything except her daughter's moment of triumph. During the lunch break, several parents approached William and Catherine with messages of support and encouragement. Sarah Mitchell, whose daughter was in Charlotte's class, sat beside Catherine on the picnic blanket and shared that her own mother had faced a similar health challenge several years earlier. "The hardest part was feeling like everyone was watching and waiting for updates," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with understanding. "But my mom always said that the best medicine was continuing to live her life and be present for the moments that mattered most, like this." She gestured toward Charlotte, who was sharing her sandwich with a classmate who had forgotten her lunch. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at the kindness and wisdom in Sarah's words. Over the past weeks, she had received countless messages from people sharing their own experiences with health challenges, and she was continually amazed by the strength and resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. The afternoon brought the final events, including Charlotte's favorite, the obstacle course race. Catherine watched with her heart in her throat as Charlotte navigated the course with determination, stumbling once but getting right back up to continue. When Charlotte crossed the finish line in 4th place out of 12 participants, she looked directly at her parents with a triumphant smile that made every moment of fatigue worthwhile. "Did you see me, Mummy? Did you see how I got back up when I fell?" Charlotte asked breathlessly as she ran to her parents after receiving her participation ribbon. "I remembered what you told me about being brave even when things are hard." Catherine hugged her daughter tightly, overwhelmed by the realization that Charlotte was learning lessons about resilience and perseverance by watching her mother navigate this challenging time. As they drove home that evening, Catherine felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with royal duties or public appearances. She had been present for her daughter's important day, had cheered enthusiastically from the sidelines, and had shown Charlotte that illness doesn't have to mean missing life's precious moments. "How are you feeling?" William asked gently as they pulled into the palace driveway. Catherine considered the question carefully, taking stock of her physical exhaustion, but also the emotional satisfaction of the day. Tired, she admitted honestly, but happy. Really, genuinely happy. She looked back at Charlotte, who had fallen asleep in her car seat, still clutching her sports day ribbon. Sometimes the best therapy is just being a mom and watching your children discover what they're capable of. That night, as Catherine tucked Charlotte into bed, her daughter looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mummy, are you proud that I got back up when I fell today?" she asked. Catherine smoothed Charlotte's hair and kissed her forehead gently. "I'm proud of you every single day," she whispered. "But today I was especially proud watching you show such courage and determination. You reminded me that falling down isn't the important part. Getting back up is what makes us strong." She turned off Charlotte's bedside lamp. Catherine realized that her 7-year-old daughter had taught her something profound about resilience and hope. 3 months after that first devastating phone call, Catherine stood before her bedroom mirror preparing for what felt like both an ending and a beginning. Today marked her final scheduled treatment session, and while the doctors remained cautiously optimistic about her progress, she knew that recovery was a journey rather than a destination. The face looking back at her showed the effects of the past months. She was thinner than before, and there were new lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and worried thoughts. But there was something else in her reflection too. A strength that hadn't been there before, forged through facing her deepest fears and discovering reserves of courage she never knew she possessed. The woman in the mirror had learned to accept help when she needed it, to find joy in small moments and to appreciate the preciousness of ordinary days in ways she never had before. William appeared behind her in the mirror, his hands coming to rest gently on her shoulders. "Ready?" he asked softly, his voice carrying all the weight of the journey they had traveled together over these difficult months. She covered his hands with hers, drawing strength from his steady presence as she had countless times since that first morning when their world had shifted on its axis. "As ready as anyone can be," she replied, turning in his arms to face him directly. "It's strange. I'm nervous about finishing treatment almost as much as I was about starting it. At least during treatment we were actively fighting. Now we wait and hope and try to trust that everything will be okay." The drive to the hospital had become routine over the past months, but today it felt different. Catherine found herself noticing details she had overlooked during previous visits. The way morning light filtered through the autumn leaves, the sound of children playing in a nearby park, the simple miracle of another day beginning in London. These ordinary sights and sounds seemed more precious now, painted with the awareness of how quickly life could change. Dr. Harrison greeted them with the warm professionalism they had come to appreciate, but today his smile seemed brighter, more hopeful. "The latest test results continue to show excellent progress," he reported, settling into his chair with obvious satisfaction. "Your response to treatment has exceeded our most optimistic projections, and while we'll continue monitoring closely, I'm very encouraged by what we're seeing." Catherine felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed immediately by a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. She had tried not to pin all her hopes on this moment, had prepared herself for more cautious language, and qualified optimism, but hearing genuine good news felt like emerging from underwater and taking that first deep breath of fresh air. "What does this mean for our family going forward?" William asked, his practical nature requiring concrete information even in moments of celebration. "What kind of follow-up care will be needed, and how do we balance caution with returning to normal life?" Dr. Harrison explained the ongoing monitoring schedule, the signs to watch for, and the gradual process of rebuilding her strength and energy levels. Catherine listened carefully, but part of her mind was already racing ahead to all the things she wanted to do, reading bedtime stories without falling asleep halfway through, taking long walks with William, planning future travel for Royal engagements, and most importantly, being fully present for her children's daily adventures and milestones. As they left the hospital that afternoon, Catherine felt lighter than she had in months. The autumn air was crisp and clean, and for the first time in weeks she didn't feel the bone-deep exhaustion that had become her constant companion. William noticed the change immediately. There was more bounce in her step, more color in her cheeks, and something indefinable in her eyes that hadn't been there since before the diagnosis. "I want to stop somewhere," Catherine said suddenly as they approached the car. "I want to walk through Hyde Park and feed the ducks like we used to do when we were dating. I want to do something completely normal and spontaneous and joyful." William laughed, the sound rich with relief and happiness, and instructed their security detail about the change in plans. They spent an hour walking through the park hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing, watching other families enjoy the beautiful afternoon. Catherine felt like she was rediscovering the world through eyes that had been clouded by worry and fear for too long. Every sight, sound, and sensation seemed more vivid, more meaningful than before. That evening, the family gathered in their private sitting room for what had become their nightly tradition of sharing the best part of each person's day. George talked about his science project on renewable energy. Charlotte described the new friend she had made at school, and Louis excitedly recounted a story about a butterfly he had found in the garden. When it was Catherine's turn, she looked around at her family, at William's face relaxed and smiling in a way she hadn't seen for months, at her 3 beautiful children, who had shown such remarkable resilience and maturity throughout this ordeal, at the cozy room filled with books and toys and all the comfortable chaos of family life. "Today I remembered what it feels like to imagine the future without being afraid," she said simply. "I thought about Christmas morning and summer holidays and watching you all grow up and accomplish amazing things. I thought about growing old with Daddy and meeting grandchildren someday. Today I remembered that hope isn't just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day to believe in possibilities." William reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in the familiar way that had become their anchor through every storm they had weathered together. Around them, their children continued their chatter and play, secure in the knowledge that their family was whole and healing. Later that night, after the children were tucked safely in their beds with extra kisses and longer stories, Catherine and William stood together on their private balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and the familiar sounds of London at night created a peaceful soundtrack to their quiet moment of reflection. "We should probably draft a statement for tomorrow," William said softly, though his tone suggested he was in no hurry to return to the practical demands of their public roles. "People have been following your journey so closely. They deserve to know that the news is good." Catherine nodded, understanding the responsibility they felt toward the millions of people who had sent cards, offered prayers, and shared their own stories of hope and healing over the past months. "I want to thank everyone personally if I could," she said. "The support has been overwhelming in the most beautiful way. I never realized how connected we all are in our struggles and our hopes." The statement they would release the next day would be carefully crafted to express gratitude while maintaining appropriate privacy. But tonight was just for them, for processing the magnitude of what they had experienced together and what lay ahead. Catherine thought about all the moments over the past months when she had wondered if she would see another Christmas with her family, another summer vacation, another ordinary Tuesday evening like this one. "I keep thinking about what we'll tell the children about this time when they're older," Catherine mused, leaning against William's shoulder. "How do we explain that sometimes the scariest moments in life can also teach us the most important lessons about love and strength and what really matters?" William considered her question, thinking about his own childhood experiences with uncertainty and loss, and how those difficult times had ultimately shaped his character and values. "I think we tell them the truth, that we faced something frightening, together as a family, that we supported each other through the hardest parts, and that we came through it with even more appreciation for the time we have together." As they prepared for bed that night, Catherine felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her, not just for the good medical news, but for the entire journey that had brought them to this moment. The fear and uncertainty had been real, and overwhelming at times, but so had the love and support that had carried them through. She had discovered strength she didn't know she possessed, had deepened relationships with family and friends, and had gained a perspective on life that she knew would influence every decision she made going forward. The next morning brought the familiar bustle of a family getting ready for school and work, but everything felt different now. Catherine moved through the morning routine with energy she hadn't felt in months, helping with breakfast and school bags, and the countless small tasks that make up family life. When Charlotte couldn't find her favorite hair ribbon, Catherine found herself laughing instead of feeling frustrated. Even the minor chaos of family life felt like a gift. "Mummy seems different today," George observed to his father as they walked to the car. "She looks lighter somehow, like she's not carrying something heavy anymore." William smiled at his son's perceptiveness, remembering how throughout this entire ordeal, the children had often noticed things that adults missed. "She is lighter," William confirmed. "We all are. Sometimes when we face our biggest fears and come through them, we realize we're stronger than we knew possible." George nodded thoughtfully, storing away another lesson about resilience and courage that would serve him well in his own future challenges. As Catherine waved goodbye to her family that morning and turned back toward the palace to begin her day, she felt ready to step back into her public role with renewed purpose and energy. The woman who had received that terrifying phone call months ago had been transformed by the journey, emerging with deeper compassion, greater appreciation for life's precious moments, and an unshakable faith in the power of love to carry people through even the darkest times. The tear-stained moments of fear and uncertainty had given way to tears of joy and gratitude, and Catherine knew that this chapter of their story, while difficult, had ultimately made their family stronger, their love deeper, and their commitment to serving others even more meaningful. The heart of the nation had indeed been touched by their journey, but more importantly, their own hearts had been opened to the profound beauty of hope, healing, and the extraordinary strength found in ordinary love.